Welcome back all. In the previous video, if you recall, we were able to successfully start and stop our data log model, which ultimately determined if we were pushing data into our database that we created with SQL Server. In this particular video, what we want to do is show you how to physically recall that information that was stored in your data log model and be able to trend it on a trend display. So in order to do that, you'll notice what I have open here is the Area 2 screen. Okay, so I want you to do the same thing, and your trend should still be sitting there from the last time you accessed this screen. I'm going to reorganize things a little bit. For instance, first thing I did, and I want you to do the same, is go into your display settings and change the physical size of this screen, because we're going to need a little more real estate, to 1270 by 785. Alright, and go ahead and click OK there. Next thing you're going to do is push my monitored variables up here for now and just slide things around on the screen. You notice I decreased the size of my running area, of my area running indicator, and I'll move my data log buttons over here. So as I mentioned, we're going to use a trend display to monitor the status of our data log. First thing I need to do then is go in and grab a trend object from our advanced menu, just like before. Alright, I'm going to draw it out on the right hand side of the screen here, and we've got some configuration to do. So for the title up at the top, let's call this retrieve data log, or something similar to that. We'll leave data server to real-time data server, and you'll see how that comes into play. Under display, this time we're going to leave the display legend, the line legend itself, and see that as visible. In the pen caption, I actually want you to change it to description. Okay, using that drop-down menu. Change the background color to a light gray for contrast. And now we can go into our pens setup. So when we set up our pen source previously in our other trend on this screen, we would have physically configured or gone by default as our pen source being a tag, looking at a live tag as it's active. What we want to do is change this to data log model and then say add pens. So you notice our model here, if we had multiple models, we could select which one we want to retrieve our data from. And then as it shows variables 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay, from our data log, I'm going to say add all and click OK. So now on our display we're going to see the 4 variables listed here. Okay, the color you can adjust if you like, but I think the contrast is pretty good for what we have. What we need to do next is let's change the width. So I'm going to highlight all these specific cells in one shot. Use the drop-down menu to change it to 2. Okay, and looks like I need to be doing this individual. You may have some luck highlighting them all and changing them all in one specific swift move. Okay, if I scroll to the right, you're going to see min and max here are set to 0 to 100. We'll leave that as is for now. Okay, and engineering units, now I want to apply accurate engineering units to this because it's going to show up in the legend at the bottom of the screen. So if I slide this particular screen over, you'll notice my first variable is mixer speed, which has a unit of hertz. Okay, our temperature in degrees C. Okay, and I want you to finish out applying appropriate units according to the values that you selected, or the variables that you selected for your process. Then the next column over, if I scroll to the right, has description. So it's important that we label this description. So I'm going to simply go in and enter in the description of my variables. Alright, and I want you to do the same. So let's go ahead and complete the description of each of the remaining 3 variables here. Go ahead and perform. Alright, so the variables are now named, and I can say apply. And you should notice down in your legend, you're going to see each, under caption, you see each of the descriptions show up for your, or to identify the specific data points that will arrive on your, or show up on your screen here. And then of course we also have units on the far right hand side. Okay, so we've got a little bit more configuration to do, but now we have set the pen source to a data log model. We've added all 4 variables from our data log that we want to retrieve. And we'll go into the X-axis tab at the top, change the major grid lines to a value of 4, minor grid lines, let's change that to, major grid lines to a value of 5, minor grid lines to a value of 4. We'll hit apply there. And under Y-axis, this is a change that we have to complete. You notice we're currently set up for the min and max value options on our trend to automatic. Change that to preset and it'll pull the values from our minimum and maximum for each pen. Okay, we're going to say apply. And you notice in our legend, our values change from 0 to 100 for all 4 of our variables. And we also see on the left-hand side, or on our Y-axis, we're now labeled from 0 to 100. That should do it for configuration at this point. Simply select OK. And I'm going to resize this a little bit to take advantage of the space that we have here. Move my title over. I'm going to save my screen and then click on the play button. And what you'll notice straight away is that we're actually recording live data. Now, we haven't started pushing it into the data log because we haven't started the data log model yet, but you should notice that we have 4 waveforms that are being recorded here since we selected all 4 of the variables. But this, of course, is live data. What we want to look at is data that was recorded previously in the trend. So what I'll do is hit the pause button, and you'll notice our pens are still moving even though we're not recording data on the screen. What I want you to do is click on the oldest data, and we're going to watch what happens to the timestamp on the bar at the bottom on the X-axis. So if I select oldest data, I go all the way back to actually a time that was based on my data log from the evening before at 9:41 at night, so 9:41 p.m. And you're going to notice that we have some data log, some variables that are data logged here, okay, but they don't look quite right. You don't see the full waveform samples or the number of data points that should exist, so it really looks kind of odd. So we'll talk about that in a moment. And if I say forward, I can advance in 2-minute chunks. So you notice any blanks in here, we're trying to load from the data log. As I work my way through here, okay, that means I was no longer logging any data, and I want you to advance through your specific trend screen to monitor what, or at what time points you were logging data into your database. So I'll simply select the pause button again, and of course at this point, because we've been retrieving live data, you notice your actual values are showing up here in our legend, which should be the same as what's up in the top left-hand corner of your screen. And at the same time, we're producing the waveforms based on the logic in your RSLogix 5000 file for the secondary controller. Now, if I go back to where I was at the beginning of the model, you recall that I mentioned that these waveforms don't look like the ones that we're plotting. Well, the issue is the sample rate. On default, or by default, when we set up the data log model, if you recall, we were sampling or retrieving data every 10 seconds. Well, the on-screen waveforms are actually updating every 1 second. So we simply aren't sampling enough in our data log. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into my data log, so we'll double click on that. Okay, and under our log triggers, we want to change the interval from 10 seconds to 1 second. And click OK. And then we'll simply select the pause button again to go back to our live data. And at this point, I want to select Start Data Log. And we should see at the bottom in our message area here, it's saying Starting Data Log Model. Okay, so we're logging data currently. And I'll let this continue out until I have about 30 or 40 seconds worth of data to prove the point here. Okay, and we're probably pretty good here. So I'll click on Stop Data. So the data log turned off. Okay, I'm going to hit Stop from the test bar up at the top. And then go back to Play. And what I want you to notice, I'm going to hit the pause button. If you notice, here is the results, or are the results of that, what, about 30 or 40 seconds or so of data in my data log. So now that I'm sampling or pushing data into the database itself every second. Of course, when I retrieve it, it shows up according to the appropriate shape of these waveforms. So what it comes down to is you really have to be aware of how often do you need to be logging this data, and it all depends on what the information is. Now you may say, okay, what is this on the right hand side? Why do we have some curved or flat lines? Well, that's a result of our data log stopped at this particular point in time, and if I click on that, okay, that's when our data log stopped. And now what happened is the pens simply draw a point up to where the live data is currently being monitored. So we don't really care for that. We want to get rid of those lines in between the log data and the live data. So in order to do that, we're going to hit stop, and we have to go back in and do a little more configuration on our trend. So in our trend properties window, click on the display tab, and we're going to head down here on data point connection. We're actually going to select show disconnects. So when there is a interruption, when we stop logging to the database, it'll appear as a blank on our trend. Click on apply, say OK, and push the play button. And if I go back in time now, okay, to find my data log, you notice there's a break now, and we don't have those odd lines that connect the live data to the log data. And of course, based on our log data, if we want to determine what the value was at any point in time, we can simply select at the point in time we're interested with, and you notice the values for all 4 process variables are listed here. And if I hit the pause button, we'll resume and see this live data being tracked on the trend display, even though at this point it's not actually being logged in the database. Now, a couple more things we want to do from a configuration standpoint. You notice, based on the way the software was set up, the DC offsets for each of these waveforms was set up very nicely because they are separated and not overlapping each other. But what if we wanted to utilize a different y-axis value for each one of these waveforms? And what I want to do is show you, looking at one of these waveforms, how we can determine what the minimum value is and the maximum value. So, for example, what I want to do is hit the pause button, and I'm going to use my active data bar here. So by simply clicking on the screen, let's take a look at process variable number 1, which is my mixer speed, for example. So you notice my mixer speed, the lowest value it is 81, based on the value that I'm reading back here. And if I click on the high point, the highest value is 85. So in fact, I don't want to monitor from 0 up to about 75 or so, because I never see my waveform drop below that. Okay, so what I want to do is change the physical min and max value for this particular waveform, and let's see what that looks like. So we'll go ahead and stop the test here, go back into my trend, and we'll go into our pens, and for variable 1 I'm going to scroll over and change my minimum value to a value of 75 and my maximum value to a value of 85. Now there's one other step that we need to take into account, because you might say, well, how is that going to affect how we monitor the other variables? So in order to do that, what we're going to do is click on an option on the y-axis tab, and it's called isolated graphing. So when I select this, I want you to watch what happens on the y-axis. So I select isolated graphing and click on apply, and you notice now our min and our max, we've split up this particular display, and our waveforms are going to appear between the min and max that have been specified according to each pen min and max value. So I'll say OK. I'll save up my screen, hit the play button. And what should happen here is we should see a much larger swing of the waveform, okay, all the way up to the top and down to the middle. Of course, we could actually change our minimum value here, say to a value of 79 if we wanted to see a bigger swing in the waveform. So I'll go ahead and do that. Under pens, process variable 1, let's change our min to a value of 78. Okay, hey, set apply, and you notice now our minimum value is 78. Say OK, save it up, and hit play. And we should see our pen now swing from 85 down to our lowest value. Again, utilizing more of the display that we have available. And what's the point? Well, we can show more applicable information to the operator. So I'll click on the pause button. So your job from here is to determine for each one of these waveforms, what is the high point, what is the low point, and I want you to configure your min and max values appropriately for each of the remaining 3 variables here so that you're utilizing almost all of the space available with this setup as isolated graphing. So that's something I'm going to look for in the demonstration. Okay, the other part you should also notice is that the min and max values have changed, of course, in the legend according to what I entered in the properties detail box. So once you have that final step complete and you've configured your min and max, and you notice that your active values are moving from top to bottom, filling that space available, or quite a bit of it. You can also continue to store data to your data log to make sure things are functioning properly, and then head back into the lab document to add some more to this file before you're ready for demo time. Thanks very much, and we'll see you again.